name is Sam Jenks, and welcome to another episode of The Way We Source, a podcast hosted by Kodiak Hub, where we share our talks with procurement practitioners, leaders, experts, consultants, content gurus, and people that we find downright inspiring, diving into the role that sourcing and procurement plays in the way we live. If you like today's episode, make sure, as always, to rate the program and give us a follow. Today's guest is a special one. We have Jon Hansen with us, a voice that has been shaping procurement discourse for the last 4 decades. Jon is a founder and a principal writer of Procurement Insights, a globally followed platform with over 5,000 published articles, and a trusted commentator who has more than 900 radio shows under his belt, including, of course, panels in the intersection of procurement technology and transformation. With experience as a provider, practitioner, and analyst, Jon brings that rare 360-degree perspective to why so many initiatives fail, why hype cycles distract from real outcomes, and why mid-market organizations are the most underserved segment in procurement today. We're here to be able to help you. In this episode, Jon joins us to unpack what really makes technology succeed or fail, why boardrooms remain addicted to the same old status quo players, and how procurement must start rethinking the relationship between people, processes, and platforms. I welcome to the show today, Jon Hansen. Jon, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here. Just listening to all that, you made me feel old. So,
well, I apologize. The intention.
No, don't have to apologize.
The intention was to make you feel grand, Jon.
Grand.
Now, maybe that's the first question. How have you seen things shift in the last 40 years? That's a very big question. But you've been in procurement for 4 decades here. You've seen the different categorizations of or eras more so of this role.
Well, it's interesting. Some things change and some things remain the same. For example, if you look at technology, the evolution has been amazing, from the 8086 and the 2800 baud modem to agentic AI today. What hasn't changed, and I should add that my background is also in high tech, is the rate of success of procure tech implementations. They remain constant, and part of that reason is that organizations are stubbornly committed to a tech-led, equation-based model approach versus, ironically, a human-led, agent-based model approach, which is something that I had a great deal of success with working with the D&D and the Government of Canada's Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program when we were supporting the D&D's IT infrastructure across the country. So, it's basically now the realization, again, you're using the word agentic AI, agents, human and otherwise, have to operate under a people process technology framework first. And that never seems to be the case. It always seems to be, what's the latest and greatest shiny technology? Can it fix it? So that,
how do people keep running up against that brick wall then? I mean, what are people thinking? Shouldn't we know better by now?
Well, you know what? I did an analysis of the CPO, Deloitte CPO survey not that long ago. And since they started, their predictions of what was going to happen is a very, very low percentage. And the trust in actual practical advice is low. And so you look at that and say, well, what's going on? Why are we not listening? Why are we still repeating the past? And it's a number of things. Number one, there still exists in the marketplace today, much more than even I had expected. No one ever got fired for buying IBM. You know that analogy. Procurement, but generally speaking, when in the C-suite and the boardroom, you'd rather fail with a familiar product than try something new to gain. That's human nature. People's fear of loss is greater than their desire for gain. Also, the system is set up to award technology first mindsets. I mean, if you look at the surveys, if you look at all the conferences, if you look at analyst firms, everybody, the primary funders behind all of these organizations are the vendors. And, and listen, I have no ill will towards vendors or or technology. In fact, again, I was on the provider side and sold my company in 2001 for 12 million for a procure tech solution platform. So I understand the mechanism. However, I think that the system is really geared towards who's paying us to report what. And you're going to go where the dollars are. And unfortunately, rather than paying for the intelligence up front, practitioners tend to pay for the technology verification from the trusted channels. And that's really what's happening. We're going to be if we keep going. And remember, one of the biggest concerns right now is the fact that AI success rates, implementation success rates, are no better than they were 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. We're still hovering around a high percentage of initiative failure. And again, that's all driven by the fact that we're continuing to lead with technology. And if we don't change that, I'll tell you this, and I've seen it over the past 4 decades. If we don't change that approach, 10, 15 years from now, we're going to view agentic AI in the same way we view, again, 8086 systems and calculators and spreadsheets and 8-inch floppy drives. It isn't the technology. The failure is not due to the technology. The failure is due to the methodology of understanding how it integrates into the organization. You can't automate a bad process or a questionable process.
No, and that I can agree with. The thing that you mentioned that kind of woke another question with me. The practitioners are one piece of this puzzle. The other side of the coin is, of course, the vendor, right? The technology vendor. Now, what is it that we can do better? Because we have a responsibility within this equation as well. I mean, what would be your advice to the vendors out there to ensure that success rates do not stay at the level that they're at today within implementations?
I'm going to answer your question first, and then I'll give you a reality check response. Quite frankly, and I've launched the Hanson method, which is Hanson Fitts score. Quite frankly, you have to measure the readiness of the practitioner and their understanding of how their organization works and the interconnectivity of different agents within and external to the enterprise. The problem is that most procurement organizations have a siloed view of saying we've got our functionality, and as long as we make that improved, everything else will work. Well, you know what? It's much like the technology, Sam, is that there's nothing wrong with the technology. The technology has never been the problem. It's the process understanding. It's the refinement. It's recognizing impact. And one of the reasons why the government funded my research and development of the platform was the theory I called strand commonality, where there's which in seemingly disparate strands of data, there are actually attributes that are related and collectively have an impact on the outcome. Now, if you only look at one strand and fix that, that's not going to make you successful across, again, the entire enterprise. And I'm talking about an internal and external challenge on that basis. So you've got that lack of practitioner capability. And what really and goes to what do we do as providers? I talked to a senior executive from one of the largest procure tech solution providers who've been around a long time, a senior executive marketing sales. And they said to me, we often take on clients where we know there's very little chance of success. Think about that. I want you to just focus on that for a second. And this person was lamenting that because, what ultimately happens, their reasoning for eventually taking on is if we don't, somebody else will. Second reason is we might as well do it because I have more confidence in what we can do and what others can do. But the sales and marketing person said something very, very powerful to me. He said, besides, we've got quarterly targets to hit and stock prices to worry about. So we have to sell. That's all it comes in. So if it isn't us, it's going to be somebody else. That's the prevalent mindset that's out there. And it's not making anyone a villain in this. But the whole infrastructure of the financial reward system is not set up on practitioner outcomes. They're set up on technology breakthroughs and how fast can we get market share. And that's where you also run into other problems, such as acquire and assimilation of innovative companies that end up, their breakthroughs, which can make a difference, get lost.
A lot to unpack there. And also a lot of truths, I think harsh truths for people to be able to recognize. Now, making sure that implementations don't fail, that we're not just selling our technology to businesses that we know aren't going to be able to have a real outcome, right? And again, this is the mindset of starting with the outcome in mind, starting with the process in mind and the people that's going to get it there, and then applying the technology. We believe that that's the best approach as a vendor, and I hope that more vendors share that particular a view of how technology should be implemented. The Fitts score, you named it.
Yeah, the Hanson Fitts score. But interestingly enough, do you ever notice when there's solution maps or ratings for vendors that the score relates to the vendor's features, functions, and benefits? The Hanson Fitts score also looks at the practitioner readiness level. So, for example, I just posted on Procurement Insights blog my assessment of Tealbook's data cleansing approach. And one of the things found is that on their side, technology-wise, it was very strong. But in behavioral understanding of organizations and not leading with technology, they had a low score. So what that meant on the score on the client side is that any client who isn't sophisticated at a level of, let's say, 7.5 out of 10 or higher will not succeed. Because you're not going to succeed without the practitioner skill set. You're not going to succeed putting technology into a nascent environment that's still looking for a silver bullet solution. You know what I'm saying, Sam?
Yeah.
And so, how many people actually rate the practitioner organization's state of readiness for digital transformation? And that's really, I mean, how do I say this gently? The practitioners have to own the success of the process. Yes. And very few want to step up to do that. Very few are making the mistake of saying, again, I want to make a safe decision because my career is on it. And I'll digress a little bit. I remember being in the States in 2005, and this is how long this persists. And I met with the top senior executive for a major energy company, talking about automating their procurement of MRO parts that supports their infrastructure, because in the energy industry that's critical. And so I asked him about a new technology that he thought would be great, and he said, "This is the one we're looking at right now." I said, "Great." So I said, "How are you championing that within your organization? Are you carrying the flag up front, and how are you getting that buy-in?" And this is what they said, and I'll never forget. They said, "Look, I'm going to be retiring in about 5 years. So if I choose something new, which we're looking at doing, and it doesn't work, that's going to be my legacy. If I choose something new and it does work, I'm going to be gone in 5 years anyway. No matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to champion it from the background and get other people in front of me to be able to make it a reality." Think about that.
Yeah. It wakes a question, though. Do technology decisions have to be so tightly tied to one's legacy and one's reputation in a business? I mean, I know that we're business decisions are critical, right? But we talked about it before the episode when we were doing some prep. You highlighted that about 70% of procure tech decisions happen in the boardroom, and 70% of the success rate, though, rests in the middle management. I love that particular insight that you shared.
Right.
Now, for me, that's a bit broken, because the success rate, good or bad, it's going to, for example, roll downhill, as it always does, right? Whereas the decisions are primarily being made up top.
Right.
I mean, how do we shift this dichotomy as well, and also remove the ego from the decisions? I mean, it's a philosophical question almost, but
It-
I'm
well,
curious of your insights there.
it's practically, in reality, a glacial question. You know, the 30% that I talked about in 2025? In the late 90s, early 2000, that was about 5%. Procurement was like the Oliver Twist saying, please, sir, can I have more? They were an afterthought. They were never involved.
Oh, of course.
And thus they inherited a lot of the ERP implementations and the baggage there, which led on to the bolt-on solutions and the workarounds, etc. So when you look at that amount, what's shifting that responsibility? Well, there's a couple of things that are happening. Number one, I think the pandemic awakened us more than ever before that procurement isn't just an adjunct function of finance. It is a strategic imperative that touches every area of our lives. I remember somebody asked me, well, how do you describe procurement? I said, well, you see that person with the phone texting? That's procurement. Do you see the person walking out of the grocery store with that bag of groceries? That's procurement and supply chain.
Right.
It touches all areas of our lives. The reality is it's no longer seen as a transactional or functional role. So now, why is 70% of the decisions on the technology being made? Why are they still at the top without a firm engagement of the very people who have to make it work on the front lines? And that's where the Hanson Fitts score comes in, where we measure that and say, okay, what is your organizational maturity in this area? If you only have, if the decisions are being made from the top and it's trickled down to the front lines, you're going to get problems like resistance. You're going to get problems like the proliferation of Band-Aid apps. You know, it's interesting. A CIO was asked in a survey once, so they did a CIO survey and said, how many apps do you have currently in your organization? They said, I'd be surprised if we had 100. The actual survey results showed 971. Think about that. So there's a lot of workarounds going around. So what you look at is you have to look at the maturity of the organization's ability to communicate and collaborate. And a lot of providers don't want to go there because that could slow down the sales process. That could reduce a sales opportunity. So again, you've got this irresistible force of market growth and driving revenue and share prices. And on the other side, you have this other irremovable object of, look, unless you create the communication capability and collaboration and the understanding of how your internal and external agents communicate and contribute to an outcome, you're going to continue to fail. And so, that's really the big bridge that has to happen. Now, if you ask me, is it going to go from 30% to 50%? It's all dependent on the organization itself. But I will tell you this, with 110% certainty, the 20% of organizations who successfully implement their solutions are doing that 50-50 collaborative understanding engagement. And that's their maturity level is beyond the silo point. But again, let me ask you a question. As a vendor, you've got a great product. There's no doubt about it. The technology, again, has never been the reason for the failures. Inherently, the technology has always been sound. You go into a situation and you look at it and you say, well, these guys just aren't ready. I mean, they're not going to succeed. We might as well put it in there. Anyway, I mean, are you going to walk away from that? Or are you going to have the courage to say to them, look, you got to change your whole view of operation, communication, collaboration, to identify the right agents. And that's really the critical point. And I'll give you an example with the Department of National Defense. When they called me in the late 90s to automate their MRO procurement capability, the first question I asked is, what time of day do orders come in? And they looked at me like I had taken a hit on the head. And I said, what does that have to do with procurement? We just need to make the process faster. And I said, well, wait a second. There's issues here. And research and experience looked at it. Most of their orders were coming in at 4:00 in the afternoon. MRO products are known as dynamic flux products, where the price at 9:00 in the morning could be $100, but for the same part or product, it could be $900 by 4:00. And then you look at that and you say, well, now Why are those orders coming in at 4 o'clock, especially if most of them are being sourced south of the border in the United States coming into Canada, which means you're not going to hit your next day delivery target of 90%. Because guess what? At 4 o'clock, it's late. The suppliers you're dealing with are smaller ones. There's customs clearance, and that's why they were hovering around 51%. So if I had merely focused on making procurement faster without understanding the impact of the 4 p.m. and adjusting for that, and then understanding how suppliers work and making their process easier, and then and UPS, of course, ended up engaging with us, Sam, where as soon as we awarded a contract or awarded a part price or buy, they were plugged into our system. We would automatically generate the waybill number pre-filled and generate the waybill and send that as part of the purchase order and simultaneously dispatch UPS to go there. And with 80% of the suppliers being 75-80% being small, medium enterprises, which were not sophisticated, they love this because they didn't have to worry about having the expertise to do it. But if I hadn't asked that question, what time of day do your orders come in? And just focus on, okay, here's how your system is working. It's working at a speed of 70%. I'm using speed as an example, or 60%.
Yeah.
We can make it work more efficiently to 90%. It still wouldn't have changed the 4 p.m. time. That still wouldn't have changed the extended impact of the agents outside of the company and supplier limitation capability. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, and I mean, to go back to something that you named before, because it stuck with me, and I wanted to double back to it. There is a symbiotic relationship that needs to happen between, like you said, process, the people that are doing it, and then the technology that's going to be implemented. And sometimes you need to take the step back. You need to have the bird's eye view before you can actually go in and find the solution. Now, you mentioned, and it was a rhetorical question, but I want to double back to it, right? As a vendor, how do we make sure that we focus on process and the fitment of the practitioners in the procurement organization that we're talking to before we start going out and selling software, right? Now, the question that I guess I have for you on the exact same topic, because I believe we have to be trusted advisors. We have to be able to make sure that there is a fitment before, and we have to be able to say no, right? This is not, for example, the game we play. You are not mature. You need to do X, Y, and Z, and then come back to us. But then we've missed a quarter, we've missed a half year, like you said, right? There's expectations from a boardroom perspective, right?
Right.
Now, how do we shift that mindset? How do we get vendors to be able to say no? How do we have them to be able to stand on the front lines and understand fitment and maturity of an organization and ask the critical questions and be able to take a step back before running forward?
Vendors can't do it. A vendor, when it's not in your control, it's in the control of the practitioners. Practitioners have to step up to the plate and take ownership for the success of their own implementations. And if they do that, then they are going to, like the 20% who are successful, they're going to choose the right partners who share the same vision and the holistic view of how things work. There's just too many quick fixes right now. We got to have a sizzle splash now. But nobody ever covers. Like, one of the things that's interesting about the Hanson Fitts score is it accesses the Procurement Insights archives, which is a proprietary archive. But we have every practitioner case study possibly imaginable. I mean, we don't have them all, obviously, but we have the most deepest one, because most other organizations track the vendor side of the equation. We track the practitioner side. And what it shows us consistently is the fact that, look, this pattern is not within the control of the vendor. The vendor has these pressures, yes. But let's face it, where is the path of least resistance to change is if the practitioner comes up and says, wait, we're going to put the brakes on and we're going to look at this differently. We're going to stop looking at quick solutions. Like, let's say yourself, Kodiak Hub, you go in there, you play it straight above board. You come in and say, look, we know you can do it, but your chance of success is this much. Because, the maturity level, the agentic agent and the human agent, the loop back learning, all of those things that come into play you're not set up. You don't have that understanding. Just like the D&D when I went in and said, what time of day do orders come in? You have to be willing and open to that. Now, of course, they had a crisis point. There was a multi-million dollar contract line, but even more so, the military considers supply chain as saying, if we screw up the supply chain, it may cost lives somewhere down the road. Right. That's their mindset. So they had a crisis, an acute situation that they had to respond to that allowed them to do that. I don't know if they would have done that 5 years earlier. So you got to look at practitioner companies and you got to say, I don't think you'll succeed with any technology. I don't see how you're going to make it work. Our technology is solid. And by the way, all of the technology across the board is solid. Let's stop the feature, function, and benefit comparisons, all right? But the reality is that what happens if a competitor of yours goes up to them after you've given that information and said, no, you have an 80% chance of succeeding. They got it all wrong. We know what we're doing. Let's get some dusty case study references that are by and large, my mother loves me references. And we're going to go. So what they do is they say, well, somebody's offering us an 80% chance of success and they're a known company. This other company, even though they're known, is saying we've got to pull up our socks and do what we need to do and work with them and take ownership for our own success. Who do you think the practitioner is usually going to go to?
Yeah.
Well, and how do you, as a company, walk away from that and then stay in business? How do you stay in business?
No, I hear what you're saying, and I think that it would require a market shift, not a few vendors mindset shift. Now, let me ask you this, right? Because it's pretty apparent that the losers of this age of AI, of this age of technology that we're in today, are those that do nothing, right? That sit on their hands. Okay,
right.
How do you make sure that the 20% rate of success doesn't become the barrier to trying and having an 80% chance of success? That do you get what I'm saying? Like how do you not allow that fear factor to become the barrier to doing something, right?
Absolutely. Listen, I talked to one of the smartest people I know who headed up the Virginia EVA initiative, which started in 2000 and is still to this day running successfully. And rule number one, they said to me, is that we happened to use Ariba on that implementation back in the early 2000s, but we would have succeeded with any solution provider because we had the agent-based approach. We had the model approach. We looked at understanding the infrastructure. So on that basis, going to your question, I mean, the reality is that's the source of where the change has to come. Now, this same person said to me recently, a couple of months ago, and they just retired not that long ago, said to me a few months ago, the thing that we have to do is to realize that everybody's skill level is different. Everyone's at a different place. So we have to manage expectations honestly. So from a provider standpoint, you have to look at them and say, yeah, somebody's coming in saying, if you do this, because they have a case study of this, if you do this, you're going to have FTE reduction of 70%. You're going to have efficiency cost savings of $3 million, right? But you going in, knowing what the reality is, you can say, look, don't set your not everybody's Wayne Gretzky or Mickey Mantle. I hope I'm not too old or dating myself on that.
No, that's a totally understandable reference for anyone and everyone that's listening. Maybe not all of our European listeners. Mickey Mantle, one of the greats in baseball. Wayne Gretzky, of course, one of the greats of hockey. Famous
Lionel Messi. Pele. How about Pele?
Fantastic.
Okay.
And Wayne Gretzky, is there an analogy between the don't play the puck, play where the puck's going to be?
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, you know what? The anticipation obviously is a big part of that. I like that. Right. But the reality is how many players are there professional sports, and how many of them are Wayne Gretzky? Yet you need those other players. So what this individual said to me is when you implement a solution, you don't try to replicate somebody who's had a huge success. You try to replicate success at your own pace. You redefine it. So that's the danger of these surveys and these feature function benefits and these bold numbers of billions of dollars, this much saved, etc. What you have to look at is say, I don't necessarily as a practitioner have the capability to reduce my FTE by 60%, but I could reduce it by 20%. So you set the expectation levels internally, you help them to set it properly. And I think that's it. Everybody's made the target of Gretzky, Pele, Mickey Mantle, etc. But not everyone's going to play to that level. That still doesn't mean that they don't belong on the field. And I think that's the reality. And that's where vendors have to come in and say, look, I see where I can help you. It's not a black or white situation of, well, you're not ready. You shouldn't get anything, no. Or you're totally ready, you should get something. It's let's set your reasonable expectation as to what goals you can achieve. And our job as a vendor is to help you identify what those goals are. So there's a cost justification associated with it. That's how the mindset has to change. Again, not everyone's going to be Wayne Gretzky or Pele, but there's some pretty darn good players supporting them. There's some pretty darn good teammates with them. So you don't have to be the best, but the best you can be. Do you get that subtle difference?
100%. The thing that you said also that jumped out to me is redefining and setting the expectations for what does success look like for us, right? As a practitioner side. And I think that that's so strong and so important because like you said, otherwise we get caught up in the studies and surveys of the creme de la creme, right? That very top echelon. And maybe there's some pay to play aspect there, right? The fact is that these reports always, of course, highlight the big players out there,
right?
They're not looking at a smaller player, a business of our stature, right? That has been around for 7-8 years, that has grown to, around 100 headcount, around 100 customers. We have a great little business here, but we're not getting in all of those quadrants always. Now, how can procurement organizations work diligently? Because I think that this also goes back to, well, what does success look like for me, right? Well, what does a good solution look like for me? It's not easy. It's a jungle out there, and the market is growing, right? So how exactly, particularly when 70% of the decisions are being made in the boardroom, does practitioners make sure that they can be able to look at more grassroots like decisions, but also equally so look at, for example, more mid-market solutions, right?
Right.
The solutions that maybe aren't getting named in the boardroom, whether that be SAP or Oracle or like.
Right. Well, you brought up a whole different perspective there, or a relatable perspective. Let's talk about being a smaller player, but a quality player. How about that? When there's a company called Meta that was eventually acquired by Gartner, and we're a very profitable company right out of the gate. Very profitable. We were delivering great results. New York City Transit Authority started to engage us. We were expanding, etc. And Meta came in and said, we think you're onto something great here with this technology. Because at that time, I was using nascent AI platforms with self-learning algorithms, and it was innovative. And they said, we really want to promote that. And I said, great, I'm glad you like it. It's very successful. We'll give you access to all the statistics and numbers. And they said, perfect. I said, so how do we get started? They said to me, well, right off the bat, just cut us a check for $20,000 US. Remember, this is in 1998 to $20,000. Not that I didn't have the money, I did. But I thought, why would I pay you to cover me if you think I'm that good? And I walked away from that. Now, here's the interesting thing. I did sell my company for $12 million, but I look at it, and this is from the first part of the answer to your question. I look at it and say, gee, if I had shelled out that $20,000, which I could have afforded, and Meta was bought up by Gartner, who knows at those early stages? I could have been on a rocket ship to bigger and better things in terms of revenue because I'm getting the exposure, but I didn't pay for that. So to your point, there are a lot of great companies. Some have been around for 20 years, some 10, some like yourself, 7, 8 years, who can actually do a great job, but you're not going to get the space. Because it's owned and operated by the people who can afford to play. It's a big business. So what do you do in that kind of a situation? How do you expand? I think now is a point of inflection, because people are saying AI. Remember when it came out, it was going to automate everything. It's easy. You just have to sort of sit back like a self-driving car. That's how it was presented. And AI initiatives are failing at a higher rate than previous initiatives. So now there's a gut check that's happening where organizations, practitioner organizations, are starting to say, well, if this isn't working, what will ever work? It's that pause that's happening. And I think that at that stage, this is where there is probably greater reception to smaller, medium players who are actually very proficient and excellent at what they do, to be able to get the ear time of not only the practitioner and mid management level, but also C-suite and board level. I mean, I have C-suite CPOs calling me on a regular basis saying, tell us about the Hanson Fitts score. Tell us about how we can change things. We've got initiatives going. Granted, they're the ones who are taking the ownership, which we still don't have enough practitioners doing that. But the real change of this inflection point is that the C-suite and boardroom are seeing that the impact of supply chain inefficiencies can be devastating if they don't do it right. And that was never the case in the past. If something happened as an adjunct, it was a backroom function, it was transactional, right? You didn't really notice it. But now, if a supply chain goes south, if procurement doesn't do what it's capable of doing, that's going to reverberate throughout the entire organization. Tariffs, for example. Back when I started, no one ever thought of tariffs and procurement or supply chain in the same voice or in the same discussion. Well, what do they think now? You see it always being discussed. So, I think now is a critical time where we have to recognize that the ground is more fertile for people to listen on the practitioner side. We're still largely a prisoner of practitioner willing to step out themselves and take ownership and not drink the Kool-Aid, as so to speak, of no one ever got fired for buying IBM. But it's not going to be an easy road. I would hazard a guess, based on all my algorithms and the models that I've been running, it likely isn't going to be a significant change until 2029, 2032, where these smaller companies, if they can survive, and some of them will be given the opportunity to be able to have at least a somewhat level playing field.
Great insights, and I think inspiration for anyone that's either on the buy side or the vendor side as well, right? The thing that you also mentioned that resonated, I mean, for us as a small medium enterprise, right, our reputation is gold, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we have to fall back on. Like, our sole mission is to delight and excite our users and grow via them. If we don't deliver value to each and every customer, well, we don't have a platform to stand on. And I think that that is maybe where wires get crossed once the logo recognition comes into play. You're in the discussion because you're in the boardroom, because you're in the quadrant, because the CIO knows about you, right? And I think that's where the pendulum we're seeing could very well swing. And from what it sounds like, you have a experience that's telling you that it could do the same as well. Now, I want to talk about a second piece of that, which is the mid-market, right? It is an underserved space. Why do you think? Because whether it be small, medium enterprise vendors or the big players, everybody wants to go enterprise. Nobody wants to go mid-market. Now, mid-market can differentiate between the North American market versus the European market. I would say that it scales quite significantly. But why do you think that providers in the procurement tech space are avoiding the mid-market and saying, we got to go enterprise first?
Well, you know what? I'll give you about a year ago, I was talking to an emerging solution provider, vendor, who said, we're targeting the mid-market because it's terribly underserved. And you know what we discovered is we're changing our marketing strategy and just going after the big enterprise, because the mid-market, interestingly enough, is more scrutinizing and have less resources. And, you know, when you look at that, I said, so you were basically originally building for the mid-market, but because you could get traction in the mid-market, you're now going to compete against the whales. And that's exactly what happens with a lot of organizations. You get drawn into these larger opportunities simply because the mid-market isn't moving. Now, the mid-market, again, is I would say naturally more cynical, certainly more cognitive of money waste. They don't necessarily have the size of procurement organization or expertise. Like, for example, you know, you've heard of Logitech, right? You know, they make the mice. You know that a few years ago, they repatriated their procurement back in-house from outhouse, from not the outhouse. Yep. You know what I'm saying?
Outsourced, yeah.
Outsource it. So they brought it back in. But you know how many people they had working in their procurement department? 3 or 4 people at most. Think about that. How are you going to go in there with an enterprise with user seats and everything like that and make money with that? And they're going to be more scrutinizing. They're going to be more roll up your sleeves. You got to spend the cycle times with us. How many vendors have the cycle times to close business over a longer extended period of time? So, you know, it comes out of the analogy. Do you swing for the fences or do you go for a single? You know, building block. But not a lot of organizations, you know, have that patience. You need cash flow. You need to be rewarded for what you developed and you created. And unfortunately, there's a very tight grip on money and a much more scrutinizing level at the mid-market size because there's more in line for them. And I think that's where, if you look at the Hanson Fitts score, if you look at what is their digital readiness? What is their maturity? Are they able to do that and can demonstrate to them how you can help them get there, not by understanding of what your technology can do, because everyone's sounding the same today, but I've actually taken time to understand how your organization works, the infrastructure of how it works. What time of day do your orders come in? Those kinds of insight, that's really going to be the real turning point for that market. It takes longer cycles and more experience and more expertise to be able to demonstrate you have that capability. And a lot of organizations these days, again, are chasing the rabbit.
Interesting insights. I could talk to you all day, Jon. I think that we need to round off, but before I let you go, you're in your 4th decade now of procurement.
Coming into 5th.
What is in the 5th? All right. Well, that then segues even more nicely into this 5th decade of procurement. What does the next 10 years hold? And what do you think will be the biggest difference or the thing that you'll look back and say, I should have known that was going to happen in 10 years from now?
Well, those who fail to learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. There is a high risk that 10 to 15 years from now, we'll look back at agentic AI with the same dismissive attitude we look at 10 megabyte hard drives. The real, and I talk to this as an inflection point, the real issue is, are practitioners ready to take the lead in their own success? Are they ready to look beyond the technology and the features, functions, and benefits and say, how does my organization work? Internally, the stakeholders who I'm not even aware of right now, how do I do that? What's the methodology? And I think that's really where the change is going to have to happen. Are practitioner organizations willing to take the lead in their own success? Or are they going to continue to say, I got this survey result, Gartner recommended this in Magic Quadrant, and put it in, to get a quick result at the expense of a long-term benefit. That's really going to be the key. That's the whole trigger there. And to a certain degree, your guess is as good as mine, but I will say this, that based on the pandemic, based upon how now we see procurement and supply chain as being a strategic, critical element of overall enterprise success, you're going to see more and more gradually pay attention to what is our digital readiness before even talking to a vendor.
Excellent insights and a great way to be able to finish things off. Jon Hansen, thank you so much for being on today's episode. Before we let you go, I want to do our little quick fire round that we
Okay.
love to be able to do with our guests. Absolutely nothing to do with procurement, 100% to do with you as a person. Sound like a plan?
I like it. Sure.
All right. One word or one sentence answer is what we're looking for. I'll shoot the first one, which I love to ask people. All expenses paid trip. You can leave tomorrow. Your family, friends, you can join. Paid by Kodiak. Wow, cash flow is looking good. We're treating you to a trip. Hypothetically, of course. Where are you heading?
Oh, geez. You know what? I've been around the world a whole lot. I'll tell you something. I would probably look at heading over to Italy, Sicily. I love food. That's one. I had a trip planned there once, and I had to postpone it because of business needs. But that's where I'd go.
Nice. If you were to suggest a book or a podcast that's on your bedside table or something you're listening to on a daily, weekly basis, whether it's professional or personal, do you have a recommendation?
Good to great, Jim Collins.
Cool. Great book. If you weren't working in procurement, what would you do?
Oh, gee, that's a good one as well. I'd be a writer. I am a writer. So actually, I have an insatiable appetite for all topics. I love procurement, but all topics. So, be a novel writer, be a writer, ghostwriter, whatever. That's what I would do.
Well, a tip of the hat to you, Jon. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights on this particular topic today. Before we let you go, how do people get in touch with you, learn more about the Hanson Fitts score, but also be able to connect?
Well, I'll tell you, being around for a long time, the good thing is you type in Google search Procurement Insights or be active on LinkedIn, and you'll find me. I'm one of the first to pop up. So type in Procurement Insights and one of the original 3 procurement blogs, and you'll find me.
There you go. If you're looking to get in touch, Procurement Insights, Jon Hansen with a E as well. Important to be able to know.
That's right. Not O-N-E-N. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jon, for sharing roof repairs and all. We made it through the episode. Appreciate it.
We certainly did. Thank you, Sam, and I appreciate your time today.